compulsory disclaimer for everything. I have never and never will do anything illegal and immoral. Everything I say, therefore, is conjecture for the sake of dialogue. Drugs? And when I say the term drugs, I mean it to encompass all the modern cultural baggage it represents. Drugs are an existential threat to all organized religions and all spiritual practices, and arguably even all ideologies. In the same way, telling people how the trick works is a threat to the magicians who make a living from that trick. You want to see God? We got a drug for that. You want to be God? We got a drug for that. You want to realize you and God are the same entity? We are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively, etc. You wouldn't believe how many drugs we have for that, my fellow traveller. We are one seed-sized object away from showing you exactly what that is. And all you have to do is put it in your face hole. Those ancient guys sitting around in sober silence, wearing robes and all that shit, all power to them. Honestly. For real. They're trying to figure out how to achieve these states without consuming flora, but through prolonged and rather time-consuming discipline or meditation. Well done to them. By all accounts, before chemical refinery was perfected, these folks were the ones leading the way to this domain of the transcendent and the numinous. They are the shoulders we're standing on, at least historically. The thing is, we could tell you from the vantage point that is the high ground of these giant shoulders. If you want to see what they mean, if you want to experience the higher states they're talking about, look, we have the cheat codes for all that stuff. We've looked at the source codes. For instance, take these mushrooms. Take these mushrooms, wait a couple of hours, and then listen to that voice that appears in your head. The one that starts by telling you that your belt's not quite loose enough and that window needs to be altered slightly, and then goes on to scold you for all the embarrassing things you've ever done in your life or might be doing right now. And then it chides you for all the time you've wasted on this earth when you could be visiting the stars. That voice. The one you could swear wasn't you, because it's telling you things you never say. That's God. Might as well be. Or at least that's 500 million years of life breezing on into the room and laying the smackdown on you. That's the extraordinary sense of extracorporeal conscience you're looking for in your whole separation of God and me kind of philosophy you got going on there. If you're of the monotheistic persuasion, in other words. But what if you're some kind of skeptic? And not just a question, like you're like a militant materialist atheist or whatever we're calling them now. What if you won't believe your eyes until you've seen universes being created, transcended, and destroyed over and over again at incalculable speeds on every grain of matter you can visualize? I mean, you look at a carpet, and every grain of that carpet is a universe repeatedly exploding and disappearing in perfectly, impossibly fractal, yet perfectly harmonious patterns with all the other grains of carpet around it. Like bacteria made of light, perpetually creating and destroying exactly the same areas of space. And perhaps you've looked up at a blank wall in the dark and seen from nowhere an omnipresent physical web in three-dimensional space that comes right up to you. You can even move and manipulate with your own hands in 3 dimensions. We have a drug for all that shit. It's called DMT. You want the kind of hallucinations that will make the most rigid materialist atheists so BTFO'd as to only drop their jaw and then slowly raise it again just to bite the bullet and do his best to hold his trembling hands up and admit, this is miraculous. I know these are hallucinations. I know these are products of my experience. But the idea that hallucinations as astonishing as these can even exist in anyone's imagination is a miracle. It's a magical, impossible, unfathomable world that I keep completely forgetting I just experienced. Of course we have a drug for that. It's the one you sleep with every night, prescribed by your own brain. And of course, if you're simply a nihilist, you're neither a believer nor a skeptic, somehow. You just at that Goldilocks Lagrange point of pure edge with no face. If all you want is to forget that there is even such a thing as a universe, or even an observer to observe it, guess what? We have a drug for that too. It's called ketamine. It makes everything cognitive disappear, except this unlettered sense of fuck it. Everything is nothing, so just fuck it. It's remarkably popular with the rich and famous, or their children. Whereas on quite another level of the religious spectrum, if you're looking to understand the Far Eastern, Hindu-Buddhist type model, wherein all creatures are of the same sacred being, and that being is God, if you want to feel connected to every living creature, or even any imaginary creature, and love all beings as though you're no better or worse than any of them, for you are all the same eternal love, and good Lord, my friend, we have a wealth of simple command prompt codes for that very parameter. Hold shift and type MDMA underscore LSD question mark underscore 2CB 2CE 2CI 2CT2 for ACODMT for HOMET. Stop me when I've typed a cheat code that is literally a crime to even mention. So, religious and spiritual figureheads, you can call it cheating if you like. You could say it's bad form to shamanically take chemicals in order to fast-track your way to the divine realm, rather than through slow, organic, often physically dangerous physical discipline. At the river, the wide, choppy river that separates ego from enlightenment, right? You stand on the dark side as you offer bystanders access to your ferry ride across the river on an expensive and assuredly character-building raft. And you may scoff at me as I ignore your offer, and I instead stand alone and raftless at the riverbank as I quietly type in a simple chemical code, and voila, I effortlessly rematerialize at the other side of the river. You can tell me that I'm not doing it properly, that you worked hard to get these results when all I had to do was work smart, and that's bad. Undesirable, shall we call it. But you'll be glad to know you are free to have that belief, and you are free to express it, and you are free to practice it, however tellingly self-contradictory your account may manifest. Perhaps you'll also be glad to know that you, unlike those who cheat, you have the law on your side. Yes, the law of the land, that irksome bunch of rules that those pesky white men keep making. They quite agree with you. They think this kind of cheat code should not be allowed, and that anyone who initializes any of those disturbing series of inputs I just outlined should be summarily prevented from doing so, perhaps with a fine or a prison sentence if necessary. We're cracking down on the cheaters, or criminals, as we call them, so as to let you good, decent folks do your ferrying across the river without any visible or available challenge or alternative or competition. Sorry, what? That's nothing to do with you, innocent Eastern mystic. That's not what you wanted, fragile Western monotheist. You're perfectly live and let live. It's just a coincidence that the law of the land is morally on your side. After all you wanted was for people to devote the entirety of their attention and their identities and their futures to you and your doctrine, on the hope that they maybe one day If they concentrate long enough and hard enough and sober enough. Maybe on their deathbed, they'll finally experience a sense of open-hearted, limitless enlightenment that they otherwise could have bought for $5 across a nightclub toilet cubicle when they were 19. So yes, fuck Buddhists too. Fuck all religions. They are all corruptions of shamanism. It's not a coincidence that our current legal system subsidizes religion and yet outlaws shamanism. Because religion is authoritarian. It's their way or the highway. Shamanism is libertarian. It encourages you only to think as you will. So unless you've come up with a religion that explicitly states to its followers, hey guys, there are chemicals you can put in your body that will teach you a much greater lesson and paint you a far more godly majesty and transcendent glory than any human display of reasoning can browbeat or water torture you into believing. Is that clear? Alright, sermon over. Let us sing hymn number 26. Shine on, you crazy Timon. Remember when you were young! Yeah, that's optional. Unless that doctrine is what you preach to even your lowliest of followers, then your religion is at worst a lie and at best a waste of time. Obviously, everything's not just black and white, folks, but I think a mistake some people have gotten into their heads is that the cure for religion is the new enemy of religion, which is atheism. No. The cure for religion is the old enemy of religion, which is shamanism. The rightful heir to the throne. Which, to put it another way, is like the liberalist freedom to pursue personal excellence, as opposed to the regressive authoritarian mandate to pursue collective indistinguishability. This is a subject I've been interested in for rather a long time, in case you haven't guessed. I'm fairly sure that if it wasn't for the gender identity politics situation and its encroaching urgency, then most of my semi-political attention over the last few years would instead have been focused on this issue, the drugs issue. I'm very reluctant to call it the drugs issue because it's largely a boogeyman based on the term drugs. Most people use it as a shorthand for bad. It's that bad thing. Specifically that bad thing that I don't understand, but I don't need to understand it because it's bad. The term alt-right has recently taken on similar properties. What I mean is, ask your friends. Well, not your friends. Ask the average person. The average person on the street. What are magic mushrooms? What are magic mushrooms? And their reply may very well be, oh, magic mushrooms, they're drugs, right? They're a kind of drug. And they might even get a, yes, that's correct, kind of response. And if that seems to you to be a perfectly sensible or educated sentiment, then I must express my genuine shock that this seems normal to you. Magic mushrooms are a species, indeed a group of any species of mushroom containing the psilocybin component, which is many. Saying magic mushrooms are a drug is like saying cows are a drug. Well, let's be fair. Not all cows. Let's steel man this argument. It's like saying Jersey cows are a drug. I think you would agree, no matter how much hoity-toity effort we make to establish that drugs are just chemicals and literally all matter is chemicals, we can agree that a Jersey cow cannot be reasonably defined as a kind of drug. Any more than you could define the Toyota Corolla as a kind of transmission fluid. And yet people have found themselves saying it about many species of plant and fungus. Cannabis is not a life form, it's a drug. Magic mushrooms are not life forms, they're drugs. Cocaine isn't a plant extract. It's made of drugs. Because drugs is a magic word. It doesn't just mean the bad substances we find. It even means the species that produces them. Perhaps it would be flimsy to analogize this with the subject of free speech versus identity politics. But to quote a wise man once again, it's not a war on drugs, it's a war on personal freedoms. Let's keep that in mind at all times. It is, as I've just analysed and analogized, it is the issue of the freedom of individual humans to use the human mind's cheat codes. Even when fully informed of the risks, they are willing to take those risks, to take their own lives and their own minds in their own hands, so to speak. It should be of no concern how much their aggregated independence might ultimately divert revenue away from the powers that be and the slow drip of downloadable content that's otherwise going to gather dust in some basement. Yes, religion is EA. EA Games is like religion. Topical or something. Woo. And yes, maybe it does spoil the game to just breeze effortlessly through all the DLC. Maybe that does defeat the whole idea. Clearly the point of a book is to read it from start to finish. But can you stop people from simply skipping to the last page, should they choose to? Whatever their motives may be, can you stop that? Moreover, if you can, should you? I wonder if there are or were any other adventurers out there who share my non-religious, shamanic approach to life. It's hard to say.
We self-medicated ourselves into a state of gender equality.
Are you a mushroom?
About 10,000 years ago, we actually lived in a kind of paradise.
No way. Like, no diseases, no death by savage maulings, no unpredictable natural disasters, none of that? Wow, tell me more.
This sexual arousal, which went along with the mushroom taking, promoted a style of orgy, probably at festivals which were lunar. At the new and full moon, everybody basically just jumped each other's bones.
Yes, I'm with you. I'm on your page there. I wonder if there's a reason primates don't typically do that. Especially the ones who are supposed to be pair bonders.
And the social consequence of orgy as a social style is that it makes it impossible for men to trace lines of male paternity. This is very important. There is, in a society which practices orgy, no concept for men of my children. There is only the concept of
her children?
Our children, meaning the tribe, the group. So male loyalty goes toward the group.
Wow, I wish I lived in the golden age. That one narrow sliver of history in which men did things for the sake of their group. I mean, it's completely out of character. It's never happened before or since.
And this is very important because once men discovered male paternity, they discovered ownership of hunting grounds, food supplies, women, you name it.
I name it, do I? How about groups?
And once you have the notion of my child, then it moves naturally to my woman, my weapons, my food, my hunting ground, my
group, my tribe, maybe? Was this a moment in history when men decided they belonged to groups instead of families? You know, like the termite type model. I wonder, is there a reason that pair bonding primates generally don't do that? Apart from the species that died off very quickly and the mutations that went wrong. Let's get real. Mushroom. It's reasonable to stipulate that we evolved from a tournament species in which almost everyone in the generation has the same father to a pair bonding species in which each father has a different child or group of children and is biologically invested in raising them just as much as the mother is. It's even reasonable to speculate that psilocybin mushroom-based diet contributed in some way to this transition. But I find it questionable of you to infer that our species benefited in some way from having unprotected orgies on a monthly basis, was it? I don't think this is a third model that operates successfully and independently from tournament or pair bonding, nor do I think it's a transitional stage between the two. Bonobos are something of an anomaly, and to be honest, the more I learn about bonobos, the less I like them. But within our own species, sir, what orgiastic sex tends to produce is a glut of children, perhaps even half a generation of children who have mothers but no fathers. Yeah, did it skip your mind there? That no matter how big or how steamy the orgy pile may be, it does nothing to separate the mother from what she knows is hers. And we are seeing all around us what a generation of fatherless children becomes. It becomes a directionless, untrustworthy, violently criminal generation of politically retarded, angry snowflakes who would not survive for a weekend were it not for the automated, futuristic superstructure of safety nets they are lucky enough to be born into. As a matter of fact, fatherless children are the most likely candidates to grow up to enforce a tournament model of primate mating. Because what you left out of the story there, Mr. Mushroom, is that this concept of ownership, this concept of my child, is something that women have not just understood since long before and after they ever licked a mushroom, but they have and will make possession of that child, the centre of their conscience and their existence. And at some point in history, human males reasoned that perhaps they could do this too, in some way. Maybe it was the mushrooms, who knows? But at some point men said to themselves, hang on, that thing women do with the raising of the children, maybe we can do that too. And the whole, knowing which children in particular have your inherited traits, having a, lineage thing, actually having ancestors you can trace back at least one generation. Maybe all those spiritually fulfilling pursuits and all that medically helpful information, maybe these things women have had by default since forever ago, just maybe, men could have those opportunities as well. Could you clarify for me just how you feel about this development?
Men were making the connection between the fact that the sex act had something to do with the fact that 9 months later a woman would bear a child. And in a way, this was the beginning of the straight lockstep march into hell.
I see. I don't mean to name call or anything, but I think that would make you a men's advocacy organization inhibitor. So you might expect the puerile comeback, what are you, an MAO inhibitor? That's the kind of joke you'd get if you were still alive.
In other words, women came to understand the relationship between the act of planting and the appearance of usable food plants sometime later.
That was women, was it? Oh, women did all that. Cool. And it didn't in any way ever manifest itself as, these are my plants now. Do I have that right? This is women. Women have never suffered from any sense of domination or ownership. There's no way they perhaps handed these plants to the menfolk and said, make me another 1,000 of these, and thus agriculture was born? No, that's me being silly. I must be tripping or something. Fill me in, Mushroom.
And the conquest of dimensionality that gave us agriculture, unfortunately, gave us male dominance and patriarchy.
But of course, it's women owned their children, and that was great. But then men also owned their children, and that was bad. Women cultivated plants, and that was just super. Spot on. And then men cultivated plants, and that was all a big mistake. Because of the dimensionality, was it? Women are innocent of the charge of doing things dimensionally. And that, of course, is why you buy all your weed from a small troop of women who gathered it from the Indian jungle. Oh, wait, no, it is in fact something to do with farms, which are things that eventually led to the Industrial Revolution and the scientific advances of the 20th century that finally allowed us to isolate that DMT molecule that you find so world-changing when administered in such a way.
With the invention of agriculture, the establishment of large sedentary populations, that means cities, the establishment of specialized roles, that means kingship.
That's kingship, which isn't the same as kinship, i.e. the needs of the group, i.e. that thing men need to concentrate on instead of their families. Kingship is different. When you add the G, it goes from good tribe to bad tribe.
The emergence of male dominance, the emergence of warfare, these are the institutions that are fatal to our higher aspirations, to our hopes, even at this moment as they were 10 to 15,000 years ago. That's why I think, we have to chemically intervene, because we have fallen into a dysfunctional relationship.
Okay, I really hope statements like that don't get misinterpreted and we end up with a generation of boys lobotomized on Ritalin or whatever. That would definitely be a slippery slope with a straw man on it, so I guess I shan't go there.
Man proposes and God disposes, but in the realm of civil polity, the people dispose, and government is allowed to propose, but that's all.
That's all? Man, God, the people, the government. Those are the competing elements for proposition and disposal. Is there anything missing from your list of accountable agents? People with agency. I mean, is there any model you can think of in which women contribute or even sometimes lead any kind of domination, any kind of arbitration on who should be disposed of? No? Where are you going with this?
The division between the masculine and the feminine is only trivially a difference between men and women. It is fundamentally a division between plants and animals.
What?
Plants are the enveloping feminine matrix of control and refurbishment. Animals are something invented by plants to move seeds around.
You've told me some trippy shit in the past, Mushroom, but this really takes the space cake. I honestly thought, right, that women and men were both animals? Of the same species, even. I was even under the impression that quite a lot of plants have males and females in the same species. But wowie! What a quagmire of ignorance I used to live in. I'm enlightened now.
It means reconnecting the Gaian mind, which is a vegetable mind, a feminine, enfolding.
Are you fucking with me, Mushroom? You've done this before.
You must have a superior model. You must have a superior model. Now, if you believe, that the world is composed of 3 levels and they are held up on the back of a woman who sits on a giant tortoise who floats in space, this is a model of the universe. It can take you a certain distance. But what model of the universe can actually offer reassurance in all kinds of situations?
Ooh, I know this one. It's the model where human females are vegetables. You're definitely trolling me, Mushroom.
Well, this is locker room talk. The notion that there is fair play between a man and a nearby star is the finest expression of the dominator ego I can imagine. And of course,
this explains why peddlers of astrological cold reading woo are such a male-dominated community. You are... Seriously, Mushroom, this is noob-level trolling now. I know you basically just make shit up, but this is ridiculous. What are you even playing at now?
People say it's so wonderful that you articulate these feminist ideas and so forth. I do it because I don't want to be dead.
Understandable. That's often my excuse for going as easy as I possibly can on these people.
I do it because I don't want my children to have no world to live in. There is no choice.
All right, let's cut the crap, Terence. Abort concept. Let's de-lobster this whole thing. Just you and me now. What's going on, Terence?
Let me say just a bit about gender politics, because sometimes people think I have no use for men. When you look at human beings against the background of the rest of nature, we are all so yang that the struggle between the masculine and the feminine is not something that should be fought out between the 2 varieties of human beings.
Agreed, I think.
What is your view of introducing psychedelics to children and the initiation of children into altered states?
Well, I'm dead against it, by the way. Not even a drop of brandy, not even a puff of tobacco, let alone cannabis even. Children already have boundless energy and burgeoning social skills, and more importantly, they have wild, soaring imaginations, full of whole worlds of unique fantasy creatures, completely unfathomable to anyone else. They already have a constantly replenishing supply of vivid fascination with the world. The younger they are, the more so. Children do not need to be overloaded with any extra chemical stream of experiential neurotoxins. That's for later in life, when you start to miss being as happy as a child. It's like if you're teaching your teenager how to drive a car, you can be tough about it, you can be gentle about it, or anything in between. But what you don't need to do is strap a working jet engine to the roof of the car, or an atomic ejector seat that launches into low Earth orbit. It's too much. Walk before you can run. Drive before you can fly supersonically. And enjoy being a child. Living in that psychedelic sky of bewildered innocence before you get old and jaded and you're left only to chase that memory of innocence using introspective, deep memory drugs. I don't want to be stereotypically ageist in either direction, but there must be a line. Like, breastfeeding your baby is important, but we all know it needs to stop and move on at some point. Let's say before the age of 35, to be generous. And maybe you can let your child taste his first shandy on New Year's Day when he's 9. But let's say there is definitely a line marked too young for, I don't know, examples? Well, that's where we might have to set the bar, folks. I think one of those kids was like 1 year old. But their mother knows what she's doing, right? She's got that gathering instinct. She only farms what she needs to feed her family. What do you think?
Fathers should provide initiatory experiences for their children. And, you know, we're not talking an overnight trout fishing trip here, folks. I think this definitely needs to be discussed. I'd be more comfortable with women discussing it because I think women are the caregivers and the child rearers largely.
So, this isn't something that should be fought out between the two genders. It's something you'd be more comfortable simply surrendering to just the one gender there. And then everything will be alright. Thank you for vigorously refuting the notion that you have no place for men. You know, now that you're in human form, the plot is beginning to thicken.
Yeah.
Well, on a personal role, what's your view and feeling about monogamous marriage?
Oh my God. What a subject. I'm conflicted about this because why am I conflicted about this? Oh, well, because I was monogamous for 15 years.
Was. Gotcha.
It seems to breed a gnawing discontent in a lot of people. I mean, it certainly did in me.
Okay, but for a lot of people it doesn't. Carry on.
Europeans are a little more sexually sophisticated than Americans, and their, relationships are more unstructured, and having something going on the side is not thought such a monstrous and debilitating thing.
Why, yes, they're probably going to lift the ban on polygamy any day now. Multiculturalism is totally how you beat the patriarchy.
Now that I've been single for 3 years and had all kinds of experiences, including non-monogamous relationships and new monogamous relationships, I'm sort of at my wit's end about this.
At this point, your story is sounding all too familiar, minus a few ideological details. We in the men's rights movement are in the business of trying to address the concerns of millions of men who are at the very wit's end you're talking about. It's usually because of the children. The children they're not allowed to see because the mother insists they are her property and not his. Which is a fucking weird thing for a blamelessly passive guy in vegetable mind to do, but do go on.
Because one has no option. If you're monogamous and your partner destroys the monogamy, you're screwed. I mean, you have no fallback position whatsoever. You're just hung out to dry. You're profoundly rejected, and you have no recourse.
Oh, Terence. All I have to go on is your body language and the tone of your voice, but it really, really seems like you're talking about yourself.
I mean, I've been saying for a long time that one woman, one child made a huge amount of sense to me, and I gave you that argument.
Yes, as I recall, it was something the mushroom told you, wasn't it? When you asked it how to deal with the human overpopulation problem, it said, "Good question, Tez. have our one-child policy. It'll work for China. That mushroom is a shady character, Terence. I keep telling you this. It's a trickster. Sometimes all it does is fuck with you.
It's only recently occurred to me that the limiting of male births is also something to be considered.
What?
That there are too many men.
Is that something else the mushroom told you? Or did you come up with it all by yourself? Having just said what I already said, I've got to say, in this case, I would rather trust the fungus. I mean, the mushroom's idea was, hey, woman, maybe not have so many goddamn children. And your own alternative idea, Terence, is I think we should at least consider aborting or euthanizing the males. It's weird listening to someone for hours and hours, as you do, looking for those words of timeless wisdom of which the legends speak. And then eventually he drops this fucking bomb. He's what we call not just a radical feminist, but one of those extremist, genocidal feminists who do indeed exist now. I really hope this is just another one of those trolly, harebrained theories you come up with for shits and giggles. Like, you know the mushroom doesn't really speak English to you. You know it's absurd to compare members of the same species with members of different kingdoms of organism. You know women aren't plants, right? You never know with the mushroom. And I still think you're a mushroom. What have we learned, folks? The painful but crucial lesson is that the administration of psychedelic substances do not necessarily open your mind or make you smarter. All they really do is take what's already in your psyche and sort of scoosh it around and modulate it a bit. I know I said drugs are an existential threat to all ideologies, but it's kind of the same the other way around, and in any case only in terms of the moderate fence-sitters. If you're a hardcore Christian, no amount of chemicals will stop you believing in Jesus. Unless they kill you. If you're a hardcore Buddhist, no amount of chemicals will stop you being such a smug cunt. And if you're a dyed-in-the-wool, old-as-the-hills, common-or-garden, gynocentrist, then no amount of chemicals will dissolve that boundary. On the contrary, you'll just rename it slightly to Gaian centrist, whatever, and claim your Gaian centrist model is the only way to save us from certain doom. Drugs do not educate you. I know I likened them to revealing the secret of a magic trick, but that's not education so much as disillusionment. Brings you back to zero. Drugs will reveal every magic trick except your favourite one. They can never snap you out of your favourite dogma, the one you learned before you were 12. If you want to be educated, actually educated, about what's true and what works, then you'll need to extract and pulverize the seeds of an elusive species of cactus we call education. It's one of those things we invented in ancient times. Sorry if it put a downer on all your fucking orgies. So if you want to train the next generation to challenge authority, if you want to educate them to be open-minded yet vigilant, then drugs are not the answer. Holy shit, are they ever not the answer. Terence McKenna might be the 20th century's most infamous psychedelic adventurer, and none of it did a squib of a diddly squat for him. He was pussy whipped right till the end. I'm afraid you're simply going to have to keep questioning things. Sorry. Out of interest, Mr. McKenna, have you ever tried Salvia divinorum?
If it's legal, it ain't gonna work. But, and that just being a cynic and knowing how life works.
Oh, well, they made it illegal. So, I guess that leaves you with being a cynic and not knowing how life works?
I weighed 35 grams of it, and it was quite a pile. And then of leaves, fresh leaves.
The leaves don't do shit, Terence. No amount of leaves you can fit in your face will do shit. You have to smoke the extract, just like DMT. You spent your career raving about how smoking DMT is the only way to really experience the land of jeweled, self-dribbling basketballs. Well, it's the same with Salvia. Why won't you try the compound?
I had been hearing about these horrendous pure compound trips. And somebody said, well, when are you going to do it? You've got to do it. How can you not do it? You're up there talking about all this. You have to do it. So I had a lot of confusion in my life, as usual, at that time, and emotional upheaval and this and that. I was not eager to expose myself to this drug.
What a fucking gimp-ass pussy whistle. 20th century's most intrepid psychedelic explorer, ladies and gentlemen. Ooh, I don't want to smoke that. It sounds scary. But go on, Terence. Tell us what happened when you sucked on some fucking leaves.
It was absurd. It was little blue kittens and little pink bunnies, and they were doing kickstep like the Rockettes in lines, and there were little bluebirds pulling ribbons through the scene that said, "Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry." And I was looking at this and thinking, you know, a psychedelic drug for 5-year-olds?
You mean an administration method for 5-year-olds? Like he's sucking on something rather than smoking something. Psychedelic drug for 5-year-olds. I'm sure that's what you'd say about psilocybin if all you did was hold a clump of mycelium in your cheeks and then spit it out. And you have the nerve to rip on Salvia, you fucking chicken shit.
Look, so I'm chicken shit, but not this chicken shit.
Yes, you are. Take it from me, I was forward-thinking, well, shall we say uncynical enough to try smoking the extract. Many years ago, before they made it illegal. And, Terence, it is the most mind-blowing, reality-distorting headfuck you will ever experience. Could ever experience. It knocks you on your ass, and then wakes you up with amnesia inside a fucking cartoon. You know how DMT shows you the magical world of elven machinery and jeweled self-dribbling basketballs or whatever? It shows you that world while keeping you conscious of the material world. Well, a concentrated hit of Salvinorin A will actually take you to the land, so far into that land that you forget you were ever on Earth, Terence. And you, Terence McKenna, brave proponent of taking heroic doses, of taking bold leaps of faith into scary chemicals, you were too chicken shit to even try the Salvinorin A compound. And now it's illegal. And you're dead. Nevertheless, you are to be punished, Mr. McKenna. Not just for this failure to do your job, but for this rather embarrassing radical feminist element in your otherwise thoroughly interesting lectures. And your punishment is to be publicly owned in the town square by a wordsmith woo merchant of a higher power level than yourself, who's about to summarize your gendered worldview and your male inferiority complex as succinctly as any preacher could. Proceed, Mr. Watts.
Institutionalized guilt as a virtue. You see, you can never come up to it. Never. And therefore, you will always be aware of your shortcomings. And so the more shortcomings you feel, the more, in other words, you are aware of the vast abyss between Christ and yourself. You will have your opportunity to speak in the question period, madam.
Watts isn't exactly squeaky clean in the whole gender ideology department either, by the way. Maybe that's a video for another day. But yeah, you You can already tell what I've been doing with my summer for the most part. Last month was Coattail Clickbait month because I needed something short and thoughtless to do while I came up with this month's content. An exploration into what we might, for amusement's sake, call high-hanging fruit. The very highest hangers of all the fruit. What am I going to do next, eh? Who knows? Well, for one thing, I'll be going for a drink at the Alban Castle in Highbury at 4 p.m. on Sunday the 16th of September with some Badger patrons and anyone else who comes there. Thought I might pull in an extra 2 or 3 punters if I announce it in a video, so I did. I just did it there. Good skills. I'm not even like doing events, so I'm just announcing my social life at this point. That doesn't count as lonely. It counts as the cool, brooding kind of lonely. The popular kind of lonely. Alright, it's more than enough like bamboozlement through intermediate wordplay. This episode is over. Drive safe. And don't do drugs, kids. Adults, fuck yeah, go for it. Goodbye and fuck right.
If there's any consolation, I've learned nothing either.